On today's PMEA's Take Note podcast, we are talking with a woman who has done a lot of things when it comes to music and entertainment, actually working in the industry. She has some fascinating stories to share on today's PMEA's Take Note podcast. Well, everybody, my name is Mark Despotakis. Welcome to this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. One of the things that we always like to do is talk to folks who have some music education has impacted them, particularly if there's some Pennsylvania connection to how music education has impacted them. And also, it's really interesting to hear about the various career areas that you can go into when you've maybe have some interest in music education, had some exposure to it. I always like to say, there's more than just performing and teaching. There's so many things out there that you can do in the wide industry. So I'm delighted today to welcome in Racheal Murray. I guess I don't even know how to describe. We'll let you do it. I don't even know how to describe, what your career is and what you do. But we'll just say that it's a lot of work and it's a lot of fascinating work in the entertainment industry. So Racheal, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for having me. As I've shared with you, I have a long and rich history in the state of Pennsylvania with music education. It's very special to me. So it's really, really a treat to be here with you today. So thanks for having me.
So we're going to dive into that in just a little bit. But I think what we need to do first is that you can do better than what I could do is just kind of tell us about yourself. I'm kind of at a loss for words to explain what you do and kind of what your career path has been. So tell us about that.
Well, it's a great question. And I think it really speaks to the point that you just made about when you are in the music industry or in the entertainment industry, how sometimes you set your sights on one thing, but you have this very broad skill set that lends itself to lots of different maybe pieces of the industry or other industries as well. And my career path has definitely been very diverse. But I started out probably like everybody who sort of comes into this industry. I grew up in Pennsylvania, in Clarion, Pennsylvania. My mom was a music educator, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. But I just had the dream. I had the dream. I wanted to be a performer. I just loved it. It was my goal my whole life, living in little teeny tiny Clarion, Pennsylvania, with about 5,000 people out in the middle of a farm town. I wanted to live in New York City, and I wanted to be a performer. And that was really what I worked towards my entire life. And I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to do that. I started really, doing theater when I was in high school. And then there was a wonderful program at Clarion University that was a summer stock theater. And my mom actually was part of that, directed shows, choreographed shows there with Dr. Mary Hardwick. And it was a wonderful program because it brought in people that were professionals from New York City and other places. And then it would have the university students and then also people from the community. So I was very lucky to start to do that. And then sort of my first big professional gigs were working on cruise ships. So I had the opportunity to go and sing and dance on cruise ships, where I met an amazing group of friends, and we all sort of had that same dream to move to New York City together and pursue careers and performance. And that was really what we did. We traveled the world for about 3 years and saved up all of our little pennies. And we had a big group of friends, and we all moved to the city together and started that journey. And, I was quite fortunate when I first went to the city. I booked the national tour of A Chorus Line, which I have a fun story about what that sort of represented in my life. But that was how I started performing. I did, multiple Broadway national tours, European tours, Asian tours, regional theaters, all that great stuff. And then I had the opportunity to do a show that was about a legendary singer named Rosemary Clooney, who I'm sure many people know. And I played Rosemary at one particular point in her life. And that was really a turning point for me because I I did everything. I was a singer, dancer, actress. So I was always doing shows like A Chorus Line or West Side Story or Smokey Joe's Cafe, where it was singing, dancing, acting, all the things. And this was the first time that I really was playing a role that I was just standing and singing in front of a band. And I realized that was really my passion. So then for a while, I was just singing with my band, doing jazz, big band, concerts, all that kind of stuff. And then I had an opportunity through that and a producer that I had worked with to go to an incredible organization called the USO. And if you don't know the USO, many people do, many people don't. The USO is a military nonprofit, but they're largely known for their entertainment initiatives. People are familiar with maybe Bob Hope or, all these different wonderful entertainers that we work with. But I went there just to consult for about 3 months on a particular program they wanted to build. And then that turned into truly a love for producing, directing, and building programming. And I ended up staying there for 10 years as the vice president of entertainment and producing shows all over the world. And what was interesting about that is, I would be producing everything there. I might be producing a Katy Perry concert in the Brooklyn Navy Yards, or I might be producing, a show on a runway, a military runway, in Okinawa. It might be a segment on NBC, or it might be a gala with 1,000 people. It was very, very diverse. And so I learned, I just got incredible skills in producing and fundraising and sponsorships and all of these wonderful pieces when I was there. But what I really fell in love with when I was there was producing TV. So I left there to produce a TV show that I produce in Nashville. It's called Songs from the Cellar, which was when, if you're familiar with the Grand Ole Opry, they started their own TV network. And we were one of the first shows on there when they first started that network. And that was I really leaned in then to just hardcore producing. So I was producing TV, and I produced a couple of off-Broadway shows. And then I produced a digital platform. And so, I've done all kinds of different things, but it really came from that love of performing, and then, how broad the exposure was at the USO. And that's allowed me to go on and just sort of cherry pick different types of projects that I want to work on. So that's sort of the Reader's Digest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's so many pieces of the puzzle there that we could probably talk for hours and the amazing stories you have. But I will say I am a Clarion University graduate, and Clarion
Bravo
is one of
you.
my absolute favorite places on
Yeah.
earth. I just love the town.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible. That's incredible. I love hearing that because I feel the same. You probably know Dr. Mary Hardwork or maybe Mel Michelle and some of the
yep.
incredible people there. I have to say, part of what was so rich about growing up was, my mom taught at the high school there, but she was very involved in the college, and having that exposure to that wonderful programming, which, you just couldn't believe what was happening in that small town, right? It really was a very, very special place to be. So I love that you're familiar with it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I just wonder if, this is a little bit of a sidebar, like I wonder if smaller universities are still able to do like what they did there. Like I one of the things that I remember when I was there, The Real World was like the big thing on MTV.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the cast members of The Real World came to Clarion, and like I interviewed him for my television show that I had there at that time, and I was just like, this is astounding to me that we are able to have such a small place offer these things for students of somebody of that kind of national known and relevancy to students. So that's wonderful to hear your experience too. The same thing.
Yeah, to go back to your original question, obviously, Clarion in particular has changed dramatically. I'm still very attached to that community. I spend a lot of time there. I have family there, and I love it very much. And so, as you know, that university has morphed into a different university now. And I know, my mom was a graduate of that program. fun fact, she was the very first class of graduates from the music education program.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And just unbelievable people that came out of there. Many people,
Mm-hmm.
Tina Bennett,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all these incredible people. And I hope that that will continue other places. I know it is not in Clarion right now, but it is so important because, there are so many, and just stick with me here for a minute, speaking to the small communities. I have been so fortunate, in my touring years, to go to communities all across America. And, Broadway musical theater, it is in every community. It's in every single community. And, Broadway is not just sitting in those couple of streets that we have in New York City. Broadway is every single town that those people come out. And those experiences, just like you're talking about, think about how that motivated you to go on and do what you're doing. Or, when I'm working, going to that little summer stock theater and I see these actors coming in from New York and I'm like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to be part of that. It's really important to have those kind of influences out in the country, accessible to people. It's something I'm really passionate about. So I hope that is something that continues because it changes people's lives,
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So you've mentioned a couple times here about your mom was a music teacher. Obviously that had some influence on your life. I'm just curious if you could talk to us a little bit about, how music then, like that role, really helped to shape you into the career, and maybe did it teach you anything? Is there some skill sets that you learned from, being around it kind of in a different way than most of us would have been around music growing up?
So Mark, I love that question so much. 100% it did. I'm going to brag because my mom is sort of a legend in Pennsylvania, and she really was on the forefront of movement that now everybody in the world knows about because of Glee. But when the whole concept of show choir was coming online, my mom is incredibly talented. She was, a songwriter. She plays guitar. She plays piano. She was a ballerina. She does choreography. She does, music. She does drama. She does everything. And I was so fortunate, and you don't realize it at the time. But when I look at my career, many of the things that I have been able to accomplish are mostly because of the things that I learned being with her when she was doing her graduate work, going to Penn State every summer, being around people like Fred Waring, sitting in workshops with them, going to show choir camps of America with these incredible educators from all over the country, sitting in rooms with people like, I'm sure past president of PMEA, Fran Nesta, Tina Bennett, all these incredible educators that were so thoughtful and committed, and artists, and doing such incredible things. Like I learned about, like I would sit in the summer and there used to be, music educators, you would get these like huge, big volumes of all the music that was being published for the year, right? And so my mom would sit and she would have all that music spread out all over the living room, and we would sit and we would listen to albums of the choral arrangements. And she would be talking to me about choral arrangements and choral arranging and what was going to work. And then, I remember being like in little workshops with her, with Fred Waring, talking about how you program a show, how you have to think about how the music goes together. If you're an educator, how are you making sure that, not every kid is going to be the star of the show, but they need to be part of the process. Like all of these different pieces of that sat with me for years. I love to tell the story that my mom was I always feel that I learned how to be a professional more from working with her and Dr. Mary Hardwick than anything that I ever did professionally, because she literally would make us, if you were going to be in the musical, you had to sign a contract that you understood that you must keep up your grades. You will never miss a rehearsal. You be in school every day. You had to do those things. Or if we were going to go on a trip to New York City, your parents had to sign off. You will be in school on Monday. No matter what you were doing, you had to take it very seriously. and you made a commitment and you stood by it. And that work ethic is something that has served me incredibly well from day one. I have anybody, I say this very proudly, anyone who works with me, every job I've had has led to another job. And, I'm grateful that I happen to have some talent that supports it, but it's the hard work. I show up like this is do or die. One director said to me one time, even in the smallest thing, I show up like it's my Tony Award winning performance, but it's about that commitment to doing it all the way. And I learned that from all of those people. I learned that work ethic. When I went on, I learned obviously all the skills about, acting, dancing, all of those wonderful things. But when I started getting into building platforms at the USO, I had an incredible opportunity. I built a platform there called the USO Show Troupe. When I went in there, they had a program called the Liberty Bells that was a group of gals that were doing like Indra's Sisters and really neat throwback stuff like that. And when I came in to consult with them, I was like, I saw what we could do with it. I saw how we could bring in boys, how we could build the programming, how we could build this really dynamic entertainment product. Why I knew how to do that was from all those years sitting there listening, to think about how you build, including many people, how you use many people in a program, how you build different types of shows, like all of those skills. That wasn't something that I learned in school. That was something that I learned all of those years sitting there. So, I could go on and on with those examples, but I'm really, really proud to have been with all of these different people. And I could name 10 more people that were educators in the state of Pennsylvania that I had the pleasure to know and, engage with because of my mom. But I'm very grateful for that. And, I won't go on and on, but that you kind of get the feel for how that education really influenced me.
Yeah, I always think it's fascinating as we go to different stages of our life to be reflective of a certain stage in our life. Because I think, I could reflect on say my high school years, and maybe I did that in my 20s, but now I do it again. And I think of, oh, wait a minute, this is what I did really get out of that. So I think it's really fascinating. And of course, some of the things that you mentioned about music is what we've all got from music, but may not have realized it, and likely didn't realize it in the moment. So I love hearing that story, and especially from the perspective of your mom. I love that, listening to the albums. And, that's great.
Oh, it was so cool. And I don't know if I actually said my mom's name, but her name is Lorraine Siegel. At that time she was Lorraine Smith, but she was a legend and still is. She's just, so influential in everything that I do. And I'm really proud of her.
Love that. All right. So let's talk some really fun stuff here. So you've worked with a lot of, big name people.
Yeah.
So I mean, and again, we could probably go hours upon hours on the folks that you've worked with, but I'm curious to know if there's any good stories you might have of working with people. And I know that, and maybe I'm kind of guiding you who to talk about here, that you said that you've worked with Kristen Chenoweth and Idina Menzel. Well, they're kind of in the zeitgeist again right now, as Wicked is popular, even though they're in the movie, but they are not the stars of the movie. I'd be curious to hear what was your interaction with them, and what was that like?
So that was in my USO days. And both of those instances, and they were two separate projects. They were not working together, but it was after the time that they had been in Wicked together. The Idina Menzel project was very sweet. It was right after Frozen came out. And that was all the rage. And, that just took her to new heights. And she was releasing a Christmas album. And she is really a wonderfully kind and good person. And she did a project with us that was for military families. And so we had some military families that had small children that had the opportunity to come to meet her, to be with her, and then to be VIP guests at her concert that night, debuting in New York City, debuting her Christmas album. And it was a really, really special day and very sweet. But something that was a little bit funny about that day is, when young children are watching a cartoon, when they think of Elsa, they think of the girl, what they see, which is the girl with the long blonde braids and whatever on the cartoon, right? Well, that's not Idina Menzel, obviously. So some of the little ones were very confused. They couldn't put together that was actually Elsa,
Wow.
right? So she did not miss a beat. She did not miss one beat. She got down on her knees. She got right up to them and she sang the song with them. And she, was showing them pictures and singing with them, playing with them and engaging with them in a way that was just really special. It was like she was more one. We were all so nervous about, oh my gosh, the little kids aren't putting it together. We didn't think about this. And, she was like, no problem. She was more worried about them being comfortable and them being happy and them understanding what it was. And I just always really admired that moment with her. It was very sweet. She's a very special person. And with Kristen Chenoweth, that was a very special project because obviously the 9/11 memorial and museum is in New York City. And so, we would work closely with them at USO, and my performing groups would sometimes do projects with them. And we did a really nice project with Kristen Chenoweth where we were, doing vocal arrangements and she was singing with them and they were all part of the program. And, just really, again, good hearts, doing good works, being part of things that are important, which is just, I will say, all of the people that I had the good fortune to work with at the USO, they give their time, they give their energy. Everybody does it for free. They do it because they're great people and they want to give back. They want to support the military and use their time and talents for that. So, I just hold all of that talent in really high regard.
In your role in those situations, you have a job to do, obviously, and there's a whole list of celebrities beyond Kristen and Idina, that you've worked with. Like, have you ever been just like starstruck? Like, I can't believe I'm working with this person, or are you able to like, no, I'm here to do a job, and I have to not be starstruck?
Both.
Okay.
Because there are moments where you're just like, oh my God, like I can't believe this person is doing, but then you wouldn't show that because you always want them to be comfortable. But I will say, and I think also because I'm a performer at heart, I want people to know that I admire them. So, I don't like fangirl out, but I do, just make sure that they know how much I appreciate them, how much I appreciate the time that they're giving. And, like I'll tell you, one example where I definitely was I definitely was like starstruck, but it was such a wonderful, wonderful moment. So we did a project with Bradley Cooper, and it was after he, had a big film came out, and we were doing, it was the first ever public screening of this movie. And he was also doing Elephant Man on Broadway at that time, which is extremely taxing for everybody who knows that role. And so what we were doing, it was like kind of a multi-tiered project. We were working with Warner Brothers, and they built in a theater to the military base that was like the top of the top, projections, sound, everything. And we had Bradley was coming. We were going to do a piece on NBC. So we had Willie Geist there. So it was a lot happening. 500 service members coming to view this project. And, you just know the guy can barely even stand up in that morning. And he's got to go and do that show again that night. And there he was, so kind, so giving, doing talkbacks, meeting people, and not in that like rushed way where you're just, hustle bustle, okay, get everybody through the line, whatever, just settled, thoughtful, engaged, giving people eye contact, time, making them feel seen and appreciated. That was one of those days where I just was like, first of all, yes, Bradley Cooper, but also just like, wow, what a person and what a professional. Like, just really, really to be admired. That was really one of my favorite projects.
So I think it's evident by a lot of the people that you have worked with in that USO setting that you've taken a lot away and maybe, kind of just learned from their kindness and learned about, their ways of doing things. But I'm curious then, if you can share some advice, maybe it's things that you've seen from them, or maybe it's just from like your career, which is this, like we, go back to the beginning of the podcast and all these different things that you have done. The world is very different now than it was 30 years ago. You might go into a job and that's your job forever. Well, that is not the way it is now. And certainly in the entertainment industry, as fascinating point you made, I get a job based off of the previous job. That's fascinating to hear. So I'm curious if you would have any advice to share with students who might want to go into the entertainment world. Maybe they don't know what piece, where to do it, or for teachers who have those students and what they might want to say to them to help guide them. What kind of advice might you have?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love that question because, Mark, I'm not doing it now, but for a couple of years, I was doing a lot of mentoring, and preparing people, whether they were going to, for agent showcases or prepping to go into the business, and trying to give people guidance because, truth be told, it's a hard business. It is a very, very difficult business. Not just in New York City. I work all over the country, all over the world. It's a very, very difficult business. And you have to be so committed all the time. And I really feel passionate about helping people be prepared for that moment. But like one of the things that, you make the excellent point about it is 100% true that every single job that I've had has led to another opportunity. And the number one thing is to don't be worried about being the star all the time. Of course, we all want to be the star, right? Don't be worried about being the star all the time. Work on your craft, be the best you can be at it, but always be the hardest working person in the room. Always. It is the one thing people will notice it because everybody's talented. Like it is like when you go to New York City, and it doesn't matter if you are a performer, if you're a director, if you're a producer, I've done all those things. Who everybody wants to work with is who's the person who shows up, works the hardest, does not create drama, is a great collaborator, takes notes, takes information, puts it into their work, and goes forward. That is the most important thing that you can do. And, I could really go on and on and on about what that represents and give you so many examples of that. But be kind, be good. I'll tell you, this is a really, I love to tell this story. So when I was producing the USO show troupe, that went from a group of 8 girls to a group of 64 performers. And when we would have auditions, we would have, 2 days in New York City, back to back to back to back, hundreds of people coming to audition for this group to perform all around the world. And there was this one girl who I loved this girl, but she just wasn't quite there. And she would come to the audition and she would do really great, but then it was like she just couldn't get over the hump. Just maybe just not quite there vocally, or maybe the choreography wasn't right. But I loved her energy. And after every audition, she would write me a handwritten note and she would say, Rachael, thank you so much for your feedback. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything. And she would come to every single audition. This went on for 4 years. Twice a year, 4 years, she would come in every time. And I loved her, but it was like, we just couldn't quite get there. We were coming into the 5th year And we go into that audition, and I had seen her on social media, something she was in, and I was like, there we go. That's what I needed to see. There we are. So I had in my mind, I'm hiring her. I don't care what she does. I know she can do this. Like, I've got it. So I'm waiting all day. She doesn't come in, literally. And I'm like, where is she? The next day, I'm like, where is she? And like, finally, at the end of the day, she came in, and I was like, I threw my arms up and I was like, I'm so glad you're here. I have been waiting for you. And she had the greatest audition. She got the job and, went on to be one of the best performers that we had, because she showed up, and every single time she would take whatever the feedback was, because I give feedback at auditions, like where it's appropriate. And she would take that and she would put it into the next thing. And she showed up, and that's how she went forward, just being the best team player, the best attitude, great to work with. And I was like, I just loved that tenacity, and I loved that progression for her. So, I also say to people, if it's your dream, don't give up. Go work as hard as you can, be seen for all the right reasons. And, and it will work in one capacity or another.
I love that. I love that. I mean, that story is the perfect set of advice right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's advice in action, I guess. I love that.
Yeah.
Rachael, this has been a fascinating half hour. It just sped by. Talking with you about all these facets, and like I said, we could probably talk for hours more about some stories. So I think we're going to have you on again at some point, because I want to hear some more of these wonderful stories.
Oh, I would love to. And thank you for listening. It's been great chatting with you, and thanks for letting me share.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for being with us. And thank you all for being with us on this edition of PMEA's Take Note podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, the Grove City College Department of Music. We'll see you next time.